Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock, and I'd like to get started on time so we can wrap this up for tonight. First, I'm going to explain the process that we're going to go through. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from the elementary school principals, a little bit about their schools and what their budget requests are. And then tomorrow night, we're going to hear from the middle school, high school, and vocational center principals. And then on Thursday evening, we're going to hear from the special ed director. And at the end of the special ed director, we'll actually have a copy of the budget as what it looks like at that point in time. One of the things that you have to realize is that we are in negotiations with all three bargaining units at this point. None of them have been settled and ratified at this point. So the top section of the budget, which accounts for 76% of our spending, will not be discussed at this point until those are ratified. Hopefully they'll all be ratified by the end of this month, at least in time for the initial budget presentation, the preliminary budget presentation in December. Obviously they have to be done by the final budget presentation in January. So that's the process we're going to go through tonight, and we'll have each one of the elementary school principals tell us a little bit about their school and their budget requests, and we'll go from there. So first, I think, Patty, you're going to go first?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Jim.
Jim.
Hello.
So let's see, that's Effingham. Okay, so.
Hi, I'm
Go
Patty
for it.
Morrissey from Effingham Elementary School. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening about Effingham's proposed budget for the 2020 fiscal year. I think you have the budget in front of you, and you're looking at the pivot view. So you'll notice that the largest increase to Effingham Elementary School budget is out of the professional services, which is a change in the nursing staff, which follows board policy from 2 years ago, I believe, that those positions would shift to contracted services rather than district employees. That accounts for the largest change.
Okay.
You want me to keep talking,
Sure.
or would you like to ask questions?
No, keep
Okay.
talking, and if there are any questions at the end, please direct them to me, and then I'll make sure that the individual principals can answer.
So that's really an even swap.
Yes, because it's coming out of one and into
Right.
another bucket.
Right, which I'm assuming you'll notice in other places.
Yep. Okay.
So as you look at the budget requests, you'll notice that there are infrastructure issues, or not issues, but infrastructure demands that require budgetary allotments for snow plowing and water and sewer and electricity and building service agreements and things of that nature. Effingham's committed to, as far as working with students and families, we're committed to maintaining the technology access we have. So the computer media software and new equipment and new furniture line items and budget codes all remain consistent with making sure that Effingham students have access to materials and equipment, including technology, that is commensurate with any other school.
Okay. Tell us a little about your school.
I will. Our school has 117 students this year, which is an increase over the last 2 years that I can remember. I don't have the data, but 117 this year. And so we were just together about a month ago. The school board was out at Effingham School. And I can't be as engaging as those kindergartners were with you. And I, at that time, told you that there were many, many things that I was proud of about Effingham School, and that I could talk, and that remains true. There are many things I am proud of. Unfortunately, I'd like to share some of the things that are demanding at Effingham Elementary School. 43% of Effingham School students qualify for free and reduced meals. 16% of Effingham School students are being raised by a family caregiver. at the moment at Effingham School, all of those families or all of those caregivers are grandparents. So 16% of our students are being raised by grandparents. 41% of Effingham School families or students live in a split single family or single parent or not their biological parent household. That leaves 43% left. And I made an assumption when I was looking at families that the gold standard was 2 biological parents under one roof. So assuming that traditional model of families is the gold standard, only 43% of Effingham students live in that model. So those are numbers that I don't know if I should say it's not a question of pride, it's just the way the landscape is.
Well, I think it says a lot. There's a lot of challenges, obviously, and not just your school, but in other schools around the district. And I think that it's good to understand, what some of those challenges are. We can sit here and make decisions on certain things, but we have to understand where, the dynamics of each one of the schools and the students in each one of the schools. So I appreciate that information.
So those are some of the numbers that put a face to the student. Of all of our students, 14% of them, regardless of where they're living or what their living arrangement is, 14% of all of our students are either court involved or involved with DCYF at the moment. So those societal pieces that walk in the front door at school present a lot of demands. And that speaks to my personnel request.
Thank you. I mean, and I certainly appreciate all of that, because we see it the schools deal with it a lot, but it's not just a school issue. Obviously, it's a whole societal issue, and we can be as much help as we can possibly be, but there are other factors out there that have to filter into try to help the situation out. So
this is true, right?
Okay.
Would you like me to discuss my personnel request, or is that?
Sure.
Okay, so my personnel request includes increased guidance services from 60% to 80% for the following fiscal year. If you want to think about a school week, that would be from 3 days a week to 4 days a week.
Yeah.
It is very difficult to say to a child who walks in with this parts and pieces of this history with them, that I want to help you, but the guidance counselor isn't in today.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to pinch hit for a guidance counselor.
No, I certainly appreciate that.
Yeah. So the demands those demands are laid at our doorstep daily.
Okay.
So I would say that would be my largest request, is that request of personnel. Thank you.
Thank you.
But that doesn't get reflected in here, it gets reflected in.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
reflected, obviously,
Right.
in the salary section
Yes.
of the budget, but again, your overall increase is $37,000, but 33 of that is the nursing going from in this part of the request and out of the other request.
Yes, and I think, out of the 4,000 that's left, I think another 2,000 is an increase in snow plowing.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah,
lesson learned.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to plow the snow, unfortunately, so.
And insurance
Yeah.
accounts for another almost $1,000.
Yeah.
So, can I just, Kathy, is that gonna be across the board insurance, or Kathy, either Kathy?
I've checked the numbers, and it just depends on how the percentage was broken down, but yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
You're welcome, thank you.
appreciate it, okay.
I had one other question.
Yes.
Telephone, internet, so the actual expense in fiscal year 18 was like 4,200 and change, and now we're at 8,000, maybe 7,000. Is there something reflected in that number? What's the big driver on that?
I believe that's bandwidth. We had to increase
Okay.
bandwidth.
Gotcha. Makes
Do we
sense.
know, because the fiscal 19 budget is what we're in now.
That's correct.
And we budgeted 8,000. Do you have a sense of where that's gonna come in? I mean, is it gonna come in around that $7,000 mark for budgeting next year's
I'm
number?
not sure, I can take a look.
Okay, all right.
I'll have that for tomorrow night.
Okay, that's fine. And as we look at the final numbers on the budget,
Uh-huh.
we want to make sure we're covered, but not overly
Right.
aggressive on that if we don't have to be.
So that does have a direct impact on your day-to-day, your bandwidth, upload and download speeds.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we're one-to-one, we've got interactive panels, it's a demand on the system.
Sure. Well, everybody's going through it. We just
Mhm.
doubled our bandwidth at work too, because
Yeah.
we had to. Too many more people on and more downloads, uploads, and
Yeah.
more emails and all the other stuff that's needed, so I understand it.
I did have input from Paul, our IT director.
Yeah.
And I did do a small calculation at the time of what we've budgeted, you know, what we spent last year, where we are now, and what we're looking at next year.
Okay, all right, great.
Do you think?
I have another question
Sure.
on bottled gas. What happened last year?
The tanks froze.
Yes.
So
So
we-
Effingham School's tanks were not placed at the appropriate level to
Right.
handle the temperature we had last year.
Yeah.
So,
That decreased the amount
Use of it.
of propane that was used.
So what
how did we-
offset
yeah,
that?
what did we offset
Heaters.
that on?
Heaters,
Oh, heaters.
yes. But the tanks have been, or are in the process, almost done, aren't they?
oh no, the tanks are done.
They're
Eastern
done.
Propane did a fabulous job this August, I think they sunk some nice tanks.
Okay.
They're beautiful, they're underground, they're great.
You don't see them, absolutely.
They're underground enough.
And that's a green on the top.
Yeah, you just got a little cover on the top.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
I check on them daily.
They're not growing anymore.
All right, cool. Anything else? Jim? No. Okay,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Patty. All right, who's up next?
I think I am.
Okay,
Well done.
all right, Kelly, let's, this here somewhere.
Given that this is my third year as principal of New Durham, the first few years I've been more focused on internal elements in the building, developing a positive school climate, getting to know my staff, my students. We did work to increase our number of devices, Chromebooks, iPads, things like that, so that we had closer to 1-to-1 ratio of devices with our students. But we have some issues that I need to make a priority for next year. And so basically what I have done is I've taken money from various locations and moved it to other places to show my priorities. And I actually brought you some pictures, because I figured pictures are worth 1,000 words. So,
Thanks.
My priorities for this coming year are to purchase new furniture. We have been doing some of it, especially in my upper elementary wing. Our students are living with furniture that's kind of mismatched. I don't know if we inherited it from another building at one point. On the first page, you can see some new student desks that we bought this year for Michelle Craycraft's classroom, and they're just beautiful. They give the students a beautiful space to work. They allow for a lot of configuration change, and so I'd like to continue to do that. Unfortunately, furniture is expensive and shipping is expensive, so we have to do it piece by piece. So the second page shows some of the furniture that's in the other 5th and 6th grade classrooms that I would like to replace. I may only be able to do one classroom next year, but I'd love to do more. Another priority is for our furniture that we use for assemblies and meetings and school board meetings and such. On page 3, our folding chairs have needed to be replaced for some time. Marcia has tried, my head custodian has tried to put in her budget every year that she'd like to get 50 folding chairs, and then something comes along and we take that money. So we need to start doing that. And we also have some, less than beautiful looking tables that we use for assemblies and those things. And there's a picture there of some of them. They're plastic. They are lightweight when you're setting them up, but they're a little dirty. Another priority is for us to start replacing smart board panels, which we have in all classrooms. That's on page 4. They're older. They're about a decade old. Many of the speakers don't work. Sometimes we have to switch out parts. We get Jody Downing down to do his magic and get something working again. We have added one smart panel, a 75-inch in our media center. And I'd like to start putting 65-inch smart panels into classrooms. When you go to the home page, you just touch the screen and you can turn it into a whiteboard, or you can use it like a laptop, giant laptop or iPad. Another priority is for our playground and grounds. The PTO is trying to help, but they have a very low budget. PTO only has about $4,000 in their treasury. Our structure on our playground needs some TLC. I have pictures in here of the paint that's chipped off, the rotting wood, the metal bars on the structure need to be painted. On our grounds, our sheds are in disrepair. I do have some community groups that may be of assistance if we buy materials, but they're pretty shabby. And so you have some pictures of that. Also, when you look at the grounds, we have a large surface where the kids play football, touch football, that kind of thing. It's all sand, and grass won't grow there anymore. So it's slippery, the kids slip and fall, it's not attractive. We have had a few contractors look at it in terms of replacing the sand with soil and seeded, grass and that kind of thing. It's a pretty hefty price. So when I prepared my budget, I kept the grounds, I think, at $8,000 because I was hoping that perhaps some of the district warrant maintenance budget could actually help us with that rather than raising my bottom line. So you've got a few pictures of what that looks like. And then in the lower field, we often get flooding. And I don't know if we could improve that through some drainage because there's a hill and at the bottom of the crest of the hill is where the water tends to locate. So you also have some pictures of the outside of the building. Although we have our beautiful sculpture at the clock tower and we have our nice tile over the front door, the grounds are in need of some care as well. There are a lot of weeds growing along the perimeter of the building. There are a couple of islands out front that are overgrown. Now there too, I am hoping to use some local people. A lady who is a botanist and her husband have expressed interest in helping us with this project, but they are older, and so we still will need labor and some cost for materials.
I think certainly some of these, some of the items in here, I think if we send them to Building Grounds Committee to really look at including them as into the master list of items that might be covered under the warrant article. They'll obviously have to prioritize what can and can't be done because we do that every year anyway. But it's a good thing on some of those items to make sure that they have the list of what you're looking for. So.
And I haven't given them the list, but I know that Ernie Brown came to visit this summer and did speak to me about the grounds needing some love. So this summer was especially hard because it was either 100 degrees or it was pouring. So, the grass got long and then you'd get out there to mow and then it would rain again. And then the only other item that might be different from other schools is that I have taken money from other places and put it in my art line. It's $4,000, and that's because we have made it a priority at New Durham to always have an artist in residence. 2 years ago, that was the blacksmith that created the hoop sculpture that is in the clock tower. Last year, it was Teresa Taylor who did the tile project with our 4th, 5th, and 6th graders that's now above the door. So that $4,000 not only covers art supplies, but also is there just to be sure that we have the money that we need in case we don't have any other funding for an artist. And everything else, I think, is pretty, pretty standard, but if you have questions about that.
Your variance at a negative $128
Yeah.
is.
I tried.
Can't complain too much about that. It's a great effort. Okay. Any questions for Kelly?
No.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
James, I think you're up.
Oh, can I,
Oh.
there was no staffing request? Here, that
Not
you're
at
bringing
this
forward
time.
right
I
now?
had,
Okay.
I did have an increase this fall, where we had to hire 2 part-time, special education aides. So that is new compared to last year.
Okay.
But, I mean, we are, at some point, we do need to add special education personnel. We have 1 special ed teacher for 160 students. And one of the tasks that I've been charged with is to try to make our special education services as inclusive as possible. That's not always easy to do when you have 1 person
Sorry.
working K to 6. So, but I'm willing to hold out on that one, so.
Okay. I don't have anything else I can think on yours, technically. James, you're up.
Sure, great.
Okay.
So just a little bit about Crescent Lake. You know, we are pretty fortunate here. We've got some great things in place. This year, we currently have 11 classrooms with about 223 children. We have had a very consistent rolling enrollment, where we go from 11 classrooms to 10, back to 11, back to 10, and that's been pretty consistent for the last, I think, 6 years. Just a general idea of what we're doing here at Crescent Lake School. We work really closely with Eric Mann, who's a behavioral specialist, and our kind of goal, just our general goal of school, is kind of school-wide behavior. And not that, you know, as a former teacher said, we kind of normal, naughty, so when we think behavior, we think bad, but really just expectations and taking assumptions out of the teaching of behavior. And a lot of our time, resources, professional development has gone into just overall wide, school-wide expectations. And similar to Kelly, you know, the first 3 years or so of being the principal here was kind of getting to know staff. I think this year, of the 11, 3 teachers were here, classroom teachers were here before I was. The rest, I was fortunate with myself and the previous principal to be part of the hiring, so that's been great. But now it's kind of getting in a little deeper is what our kind of needs are and where we are as a school and where we're going. So everything kind of focuses around school-wide behavior and how do we support that. Our big initiative outside of behavior has been, really over the last 4 years, is technology. And that's really where the bigger kind of the number comes up in our budget. We've worked really hard to become a one-to-one initiative here at this school. It's not just a one-to-one device, but specifically we're working off of Chromebooks. Prior to that, we didn't really have a recycling program in the sense of how we recycle the Chromebooks. They have, unfortunately, a limited shelf life. We're trying to be fairly fiscally responsible. They are currently, we have about 227 Chromebooks. So we have right now 5 extra, but we're sitting in November. Those are right now currently just being housed at school. It's not a between home and school system at this point. It's really just here at school. Also currently have 20 laptops for staff. That again, there had not been a recycling system on how we support technology, and as it changes, we have also added 4 smart panels we've decided not to necessarily go with a brand name. We've kind of gone with an Aver, and been able to get more for the money on those. But when you get new hardware, software, the old computers don't work because we need more memory, we need more RAM. So that's, we encountered that a little bit last year, so getting the teachers the right resources to do what they need to do. So with that, we currently have 4 panels that teachers work off of. And the panels, essentially, it's not just kind of where Kelly and Patty might have spoken to about the smart boards. These kind of, because of the timing and the age of them, they've kind of come overpriced whiteboards a little bit, where they don't work as well as they used to. The new panels, it's almost Chromecast, so a child from their own device, all 23 children can cast up to the smart panel. Teachers can also cast down into individual students, the software embedded within. It's pretty cool when they have, work within, curricular work within the software teacher puts in. The software can analyze that and give teachers a report on the children's understanding of the material. So it's kind of an engagement piece. It's not just a, word processor. We're really, it's pretty engaging at the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. Currently, we do still have 2 classrooms, health classroom, library in here, that we still use kind of more of a pull-down screen. Again, not just jumping in to buy, but trying to have a plan for how we're allocating those funds. And we worked a lot with Paul. Paul's been really great on kind of, here's our budget, how do we plan out accordingly. So with that too, we've also, technology-wise and where that budget monies goes, we, for the last 4 years, we bought 2 FM towers. So an FM tower is essentially a speaker for the teacher to wear, that kind of a headset or lapel, and really it provides surround sound, if you will, for the teacher. So it's not in a sense of a hearing impairment where a lot of us think, oh, we need that for hearing. It really engages children. It keeps attention because they're getting that sound from all directions. And our teachers have really bought in. They use it. And next year we'll have 10 in the building, which every classroom teacher will be instructing with an FM system somewhere in their classroom. So those are a bit priced, and those keep going up actually. Other budgetary items, we are sitting, I think, on year 23 Crescent Lake School, and we're under some of the same building, same tables, chairs that I think came in from Carpenter School when Crescent Lake became Crescent Lake.
It seems like 23 years doesn't seem possible.
Yeah, so I coming in the district, I hear, oh, you're the new school. You're 23 years, this building is that old.
Well, and it's funny because I think I've told people my very first year on the board, I was assigned to be chair of the Cell Carpenter School Committee, which wasn't a really popular thing. And because of that, I lost the election the next year.
Yeah.
So, fortunately, I got back on the board, but that was, and then when I got back on the board, it's when Crescent Lake got built, so that was quite a while ago.
Yeah, and we're fortunate, some of those line items are maintenance, and, it kind of looks like a hit, but the building looks as if it opened the doors yesterday. I mean, really, they've done a great job with the grounds. As you saw when you came in, if you saw it was light enough, all the trees that got taken down between the school and the parking lot. I mean, it's a lot of things even there that we've been fortunate to kind of keep this place looking like the new school.
And the maintenance and custodial staff in this district is phenomenal.
We're very fortunate, very fortunate. Just a couple highlights. Our school last year, Coder Z, we've been putting a lot of time into technology and using it specifically. Coder Z is a company that held a statewide coding competition last year for the first time. Our school did enter, I think with Tuftonboro as well, entered and got into the state competition that was held at Pinkerton Academy. And we got in actually because we met the criteria under faculty participation. So enough faculty members were on coding and whatnot with the kids that allowed us under that category to get in. And the kids did really, really well there. This weekend, our students came in 6th at the regional competition for robotics. I guess we're 8 points, my understanding is, from going on. But more importantly than any points, 1st or 2nd or 3rd for us, they actually ended up winning the Core Value Award, which was about team membership and perseverance and encouragement within a team. So they came in first in that, which was, yeah, the coaches, Coach Diamond and Coach Bergeron were amazing with the children, and pretty cool thing this weekend.
James, what's the name of that award?
The Core Values Award
Values.
at a Lego League Robotics. Other great things that we're able to do here, we got a really great grade 4, 5, 6 course. Over 43% of our kids actually participate in that. This year, numbers have sometimes been higher. Last year, our 5th and 6th grade band, I think we're over 55%. Sometimes we have a different clientele of children. This year, we have 47% of kids participating in band. And then some of the technology back again, I know it's a large item. We updated our wired Wi-Fi hotspots this year out of our kind of budget piece, just so we weren't waiting for some of other monies. And this is the first year that I've been in the district that we've been able to test for state testing, local online testing, that we've not lost any connectivity, zero connectivity we lose, which was really just helpful for maximizing programming time, not necessarily taking extra time to do testing. So that was a great benefit for us, and as we continue to update, we kind of got computers and we weren't able to use them all because of the Wi-Fi, so that's been helpful. And then this year we're working under, not necessarily our budget, but updating the cameras pieces as we're working again with Paul on that.
All right, great. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, the building service agreements, what's driving, does anyone know
Absolutely.
what's driving that?
It's the nurses, the component of the nurses is my understanding of those monies.
That falls under building service as opposed to professional services?
It's not?
No.
Is it 431?
That was-
Contracted computers. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Contract.
That would be if you have somebody come in, if you have agreements, like someone coming in to work on your fire extinguisher,
yeah, that's
or
right.
to things like that, just the things in your building that need that regular maintenance for
Yeah.
someone coming in from the outside.
Mechanical kind of
Yeah.
service
Yeah.
agreements and that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
And I think you'll see that across the district too, that the overall budget on the service agreements has gone up over the years because of the new technology that's involved in the controls for the heating and cooling systems and all of those things. So as we built the complex out and went with the geotherm and all those technology things where, you can sit at home and control the heat and cooling and any one of the buildings in the district, that's what a lot of those service agreements cover on an annual basis, plus the sprinkler systems and all the other stuff in the things. So, okay. Okay, who's up next? Thank you, James.
Well, can we, any staff requests?
No staff requests, and actually, because we have that rolling enrollment, next year we will be down to 10 classrooms with teachers, right? So actually, if you look at just us as a whole, it would be a reduction.
One reduction,
Yes, sir.
probably moving elsewhere.
Correct, exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, who wants to go?
Good, I think it's me.
Okay, go for it.
Hi. So this is my first year at Ossipee Central School, but it's my pleasure to talk to you about Ossipee and our budget requests. First, I'd like to give you just a little bit of information regarding enrollment and then our goals moving forward. So enrollment, right now, we currently have 314 students, and that's been a general consistent pattern over the past few years. We have 8, and that's pre-K through 6th grade. And with that, we have 18 and a half classroom teachers. That doesn't include special education teachers, specialists, reading specialists, part-time special teachers. So our goals in professional development have been focused on literacy, math, behavior, and technology. Literacy focusing on fluency, decoding, automaticity, expression, and comprehension, and that's our learning objective for this year. And our math, of course, focuses on problem-solving, fluency, and automaticity. Behavior, we are working towards that, focusing on trauma-sensitive needs, social-emotional, and self-regulatory skills. And our technology professional development has focused on leading students to the 21st century skills so that they can become empowered learners, digital citizens, and creative communicators. So when you look at, I'll talk about the budget first. Again, we have a small amount for new furniture and then some for general to replace furniture. And again, it's just things are becoming older and things do need to be replaced over time. Some new furniture, additional seating and equipment to accommodate different students' learning styles and their regulation skills is important. It's just a small amount, but that does continue to be necessary. And then, again, just replacing some old furniture that needs to be fixed or, is unrepairable, because we do a nice job trying to repair furniture that needs to be repaired. And some larger numbers for computers and general equipment. Our school is not a one-to-one school yet with technology, and that is definitely on my radar to become that, and making sure that we are purchasing, and really, like James had said, more in the Chromebook realm that way. We do have some iPads and things like that, and typically we do get some of that through technology grants. Our Google Chrome operating system is also purchased within those lines. So that's really what it's just the same amount of money that we've continued to have, but it's really important to continue that. And then, my overall budget request, you'll notice that it's less than what it was. So it's 0.24% less than what it was the year before. So nothing really has changed there, just continuing with that budget.
Any staffing requests on your
Yes,
part?
I do have a staffing request. I am proposing an additional part-time school counselor for a 60% position. We currently have one full-time counselor to service, our over 300 students. That counselor currently conducts classroom guidance, individual and small group counseling, provides consultations to teacher and parents, addressing crisis situations, referring families to outside agencies, and facilitating parent communication. So the addition of a part-time counselor would provide additional support for students, parents, and the community. I'm looking for that person to provide related services, crisis intervention for students and families, services to families to access and utilize school and community resources, and to obtain and coordinate community resources to meet student needs, which would allow the full-time counselor to continue their classroom guidance for social emotional learning and development, as well as individual and small group counseling. So I do have a little bit of background information just to learn a little bit about the culture of OSSIP. So according to the economic and labor market information under the community profiles for the town of Ossipee, 19% of the town's population is living in poverty, which is 10% higher than the state average. And then when you go on the Department of Education's website, they have the 2017-18 data available. And Ossipee had 59% of their school population receiving free and reduced lunch. Talking with our district homeless liaison, there are currently 17 documented children that at Ossipee that are identified as being homeless. And 60 students are receiving the 68 hours of hunger food bags, which provides food on the weekends for children. And those numbers in both of those areas are projected to increase over the course of this school year. So I feel like that information just provides a little bit more detail as to, why it is necessary. I do have a little bit of information too on what the current school counselor has provided for service. So last year, the school counselor provided 185 students with individual counseling. And the total individual sessions that year were over 1,300. So as you can see, it definitely limits the amount of classroom time they're able to do, as well as be able to help families access different needs that they have within the community, or access other mental health facilities, things like that. So. Okay.
Anything?
No, I don't have anything.
I think it's it's always amazing. I appreciate the information on the kids in, receiving the 68 hours of hunger stuff. And, it just amazes me that, in this area that there's, that need is there, but it is there. And I'm glad we're looking at it.
We're very fortunate to have that,
Yeah,
for sure.
it's amazing, it really is. So, thank you. Okay,
I think Ryan's next.
Thank you.
okay, Tuftonboro.
Tuftonboro Central School, this is my first year talking about the budget. I'll start by talking about the school. We did celebrate our 80th birthday back in September, and we invited past staff, former principals, and they all spoke, and Andrea came back and did a great job, and Ken Perry came back and gave tours to all the classes throughout the building.
I think Ken built the school.
Back in September, we also had our annual trip to Mara Vista with 6th graders. I was able to attend with them, and they get an experience of collaboration and problem solving, and really learning what it takes to become a leader and bring that back to the school and continue with that tradition. We also have a robotics team that had some good success this past weekend. They qualified for the state finals in December 2nd at Wyndham High School. They did a great job. They had an interesting year where they were practicing, but they also attended a workshop at the Shepherd McAuliffe Discovery Center. And they went to my old school, Prospect Mountain High School, and visited with the Bob 319 robotics team. Went to the school, and the students there showcased a lot of the skills that they had been working on. And we are also a part of the Coder Z competition this year, and the recent data is we're 9th in the state, and that's considering high schools and middle schools. We've had some field trips. The hiking club had some rainy dates, but they did have the final trip to Bald Knob Trail. We also had our kindergartners and 1st graders go to Beans and Greens to have a day there. It was interesting. It was a little cold. They made it back. And some of the things I've learned at Tuftonboro so far is they take their kickball very seriously. I thought I was taking it easy, and I had a nice line drive, and a 5th grader by the name of Fournier snagged it out of the air. And so I learned my lesson. But the students, Mrs. DeMacy, who's the Student Support Center, and Mr. Tatro, our guidance counselor, have worked together in creating the rules for kickball, and actually communicated with Tuftonboro Parks and Rec, and Tuftonboro Parks and Rec has created a sign for our backstop, so it's a really nice experience. Some of the other things we're working towards as a school is improving writing, specifically looking at the writing workshop and strategies that work for each level, and testing that out and communicating amongst staff what's working, what's not working. We're continuing with the social emotional component that they worked on last year, and we have Student Support Center, which is very helpful. We're keeping a lot of data of what's, who's coming in, what kind of, how are we intervening, and what do we continue to need to improve on. We're also having Mr. Tatro, who's the guidance counselor, work on the zones of regulation, and communicating that in classroom lessons, but also on an individual basis. And we've created this intervention team, which consists of specialists, special education teacher and guidance counselor, to take all of those support center zones of regulation, communicating, and see what we can do for kids, especially those ones that are falling through the cracks academically, socially, and emotionally. So that's what we've been working towards. It's been a great experience so far in my first few months there. The budget, I tried to keep it the same because I need to see what we're using and how we're using it, what we need more of. There are 3 lines that I did add to, or 3 areas. One being books, print, media, reading, one being new equipment, computers, and one increasing the special education teaching position. So the reading line, I increased about 1,200. And I was in conversation with our 2 reading specialists, and some of our resource books are a little dated, some of them from 1982 or 1984, when I was a 2nd grader. So we talked about what's the approach that we can do, that we can manage getting some new resources in there. And first we tried looking into replacing classroom sets, and that was just too expensive. So we talked about supplementing, and what can we replace within one specific classroom, and The 1,200 really would manage supplementing 2 different classrooms for next year and helping and add to those resources. So in the new equipment, computers, that one's a little trickier. It looks a lot bigger. It was originally 5,700, and what I did was I moved some lines. I looked at last year's budget and what was used and what wasn't used and what maybe we could move a little bit into, and so I took from 10 different lines, adding about $3,723, and then I requested 1,200 on top of that, which brings it up to, I believe, 10,623. The reason for that is I've been talking to the library media specialist all year about a smart panel. And the need for the smart panel is interactive, is to really have teachers come and use it within the library. It'll be placed in the library, but the library media specialist will be doing lessons, the guidance counselor, and it gives an opportunity for students to really interact with that material. It can be used as a whiteboard. You can also castify things onto it. So if I'm having a staff meeting and we're working on something that's either connected to behavior, it's connected to writing, we can work on it together. And so that's one of the main reasons why we're doing that.
So your staffing request is for?
The staffing request is for, we have a 70% special education teacher. Currently, we have a population of 22 students with IEPs. Within the requirements of those IEPs, I believe she's there for 26 hours, and most of those hours are dedicated to student needs. It doesn't leave a lot of opportunity for developing IEPs, communicating with teachers, meetings, which could take 1 to 2 hours. So there's a need. It's an invaluable position, really supports all the other work we're doing with guidance and support center and students' needs.
So that would go full-time?
Yes.
Remind me, snow removal in Tuftonboro, does the town do that or something? And
Yes.
is that why it's so much lower than every place else?
Yeah, the town
Yeah.
of Tuftonboro, as part of the process, because and I think the town has already, always done that, because the field that the kids play on is a town field.
Right.
So they kind of feel responsible to do that anyway, and that's been a good process, and the town doesn't mind doing it, so.
Yeah, it's been great to work with them. We have also requested the Foursquare area needs some painting. And so a community member has offered his assistance, and the Parks and Rec were supportive and said, we can do it.
Yeah,
So-
Park and Rec has been very active in their, they've got a little bit of money to put towards some of that stuff, so it's good.
Yeah.
Good, excellent. Any other questions?
No, but just so for those out there, this one is just, it's up 1.49%.
Yeah, $3,250. So I think we can add all these up later on, but I think we're going to come up to less than $20,000 for that middle section of the budget. Okay. And then we'll see what we can do. I didn't bring my record. All right, Mary.
Good evening, everyone. So being new to Carpenter, well, not being new to Carpenter, being new to Carpenter as a principal, and like Ryan, this is my first budget that I'm presenting today, and Jan has clearly left me in good hands. I followed a similar process that she had used in the past, and I think we made out okay at Carpenter. We didn't have much of an increase. So just a little bit about our building in general. We're a bit unique in that we're a K-3 building, and if we were to characterize ourselves, I think we would say we're readers and writers and scientists and explorers and thinkers and creators and problem solvers. We know that in the population of students that we deal with, that active involvement is really important, and that offering lessons that incorporate a variety of modalities is equally important. We do this by using a variety of methodologies that incorporate developmentally appropriate strategies. Currently, our enrollment is up to 256 students. Interestingly, we've had 31 students move in since June, so our numbers keep
Wow.
shifting a bit. Our kindergarten numbers are very high. When we look at our school goals, we're focusing also on literacy, on math, on technology, and the implementation of a level behavior system. Just a little bit of research to share with all of you about reading. So the majority of children who enter kindergarten and elementary school at risk for reading failure can learn to read at average or above average levels if they're identified early and given systematic and intensive instruction in phonemic awareness, phonics, reading fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension strategies. So at Carpenter, we take reading very seriously. And when we look at our budget, a lot of it is devoted and dedicated to the purchasing of print media and books. It's important in a K-3 building because we recognize the importance of quality reading instruction and require that materials to support to ensure that our students have access to all the components of high-level reading instruction. Additionally, we recognize that reading instruction doesn't end after the literacy block and that all people have to learn to read across different content areas and for a variety of purposes. So it's our responsibility to teach children to also read across curriculum areas. So again, when you look at our budget, we do focus a lot of our funding there. Additionally, we are looking at some increases in the area of general supplies. We're consumers. We use a lot of paper, glue, crayons. We're busy people at Carpenter. But a lot of the programs that we use are consumables and they need to be purchased each year. So that accounts for a slight increase there. We're also focusing on technology. At this point, we don't have a replacement plan, but I just want to check. I believe over 40% of our Chromebooks that we're using currently in classroom are older than 3 years old, so we'll be looking at a replacement cycle for those this year. We, like James, have also been working with Eric Mann. We're quite a seasoned group at Carpenter School, and so we realize the significance and the importance of being able to collaborate and work together to solve our problems, but we also realize that at times we need to look for outside support, and Eric Mann has been invaluable in helping us develop a tiered social emotional approach throughout our second grade.
Any staffing requests?
We're not asking for any staffing increases. So when we look through, I think really our biggest line items are in general supplies and books and other print media. You know, we've been really fortunate to that we live in a community that embraces what we do at Carpenter. And the other day we had students going to school on a fire truck, and we have a lot of volunteers, so we're fortunate.
So the items that fall under general supplies, are those the same items from school to school, or could they vary because one principal might feel like something falls under general supplies and someone else feels it falls under
They should be,
books and printed media, you know what I
they
mean?
should be pretty consistent.
Okay.
Now, what's consumed is different in different schools.
Right, yeah, exactly. I was just wondering if that,
Yeah, I think
the
they're all.
budgeted amount,
Yeah, they're all in that
was
same
it
code.
because they were budgeting
Yeah.
different, you know, where there are some things that could
Yeah.
fall under different categories?
Yeah, I think they all fall under the specific object codes, like all these supplies here under code 610.
Sure.
So yeah, some schools might use different numbers.
But like a book wouldn't fall under there, generally speaking.
Correct.
Yeah,
Alright.
not unless it's a workbook,
Right.
and you're marking in the workbook, and so
But
then
would
that makes
everybody
it-
be putting workbooks into general supplies?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because it does vary significantly from
Yeah.
school to
Yeah.
school, so I was just trying to get a feel.
And then those schools that have more access to technology and more kids using technology, their supplies might be a little bit different because they're
Sure.
doing a lot of things digitally.
Yeah.
I think that was really interesting to go through past budgets and look at amounts that were spent on just maybe one
one area of like a science curriculum. And so when you're looking at integrating, which we try our best to, through a K through 3 building, to use level of literature to support a science topic, for one topic, it was $800. So it's a large expense.
Okay. Yes, sir.
The process,
Yeah.
you've got budget requests.
Yeah.
How are they funded? Are they funded out of the one big account, or do those requests go back to each town's tax rate?
No, it's the total budget. So all of the numbers go into the total budget, and then that's, at the end of the day, that budget is allocated to each town based on the 75-25 formula.
So I heard the reports tonight, and it seems like there's a lot of areas where we're out of balance with respect to technology. For example, who drives that curriculum? Who drives that common thrust, if you will, that we're all going to invest in technology?
Well,
I can answer that. The expertise of the staff members is very different in different buildings. So for example, you heard a lot about James' building tonight because James has a number of teachers that have been in school recently, and so they are pretty up to date with technology, and he's been able to take off really quickly with his staff. The other staff members require a little bit more professional development because they're not digital natives like James' staff is.
But in the meantime, those students that aren't in James's school are suffering because they don't have the resources to excel.
Yeah. Not necessarily. Andrea, did you want to answer that?
So, I mean, I think the other thing to think of, we didn't all talk about everything that's going on in our buildings. So, like they talked about with the interactive panels and things like that, Ossipee Central School also purchased one of those last year. So, you know, just weighing the needs and where you're at. So when I say too, like my school isn't one-to-one yet, we're pretty close. I can't give you the actual figures, but we're pretty close. And just making sure that the certain grade levels have access to that. I mean, and not every classroom is using a computer all day long, all the time anyway. So you can pull from different places. The media center has their own carts and things like that. So, so like Kathy said, you know, there may be different levels of professional development, but I think we're all moving towards the same.
That was the example, but I sense that there's different needs at the different schools.
And I think that will always be the case, different needs, not necessarily just technology, but just given the different cultural dynamics.
So that leads to, when it comes time for funding, you don't just take their request, you decide which schools need extra money to bring them up to the standard. Or one school needs equipment, desks.
Well, yeah, and you're right. You know, these budget requests come in and, you know, once they get put into the master budget, like all the technology requests will show up on one line item in the budget. But we can, you know, each principal and the board and the different experts within the district can help the principals determine what their needs are and what money can be allocated from there. They're requesting specifics, but it's not locked in. If they, you know, say Andrea requests $20,000, well, if she needs $22,000 or $25,000, we're not going to say you can't have the other $5,000.
When do you make those decisions?
Those decisions are made during the year as we're spending the money, and because one school may have requested 25 but really only needs 15. When it really comes down to purchasing what they need to purchase. So they're doing their best guess or best estimate on what equipment they need, what they need to replace, what they need to upgrade.
But some schools might need more than another.
And that's part of this process.
And
If
you would do
they're,
that at the budget hearings?
well, if that's what they're requesting now, we're gonna put it into the budget. So we're relying on the principals to tell us what their needs are from the technology standpoint. They didn't go into every single line item, because when we look at a line item that says, you know, computers, there's only a small number here. Well, if you flip over the page, there's like 18 different areas that go into that line item, and they've cut out a whole bunch of other little things that they don't need, but the computers themselves are actually in there. So it's a process, and The object numbers that they use here for the budgeting process, and this is standard through the education process, like all 610 accounts are general supplies. Well, within general supplies, you have, 25 different line items. But
You could have math,
every-
you could have English, you could have social
Right,
studies.
but everything
science,
dumps into
right.
that one bucket. Same thing with the technology line items.
I'm not doing a good job of explaining. Who makes the call if one school needs more money? More than the budget?
They're gonna make that request right now during this
I
budget process.
understand, I understand, but you sit back and you say, I understand your request, this school needs more.
Mhm.
Does anybody make that call?
Well,
Go ahead.
one of the things we do before this even gets here is Kathy and I go through the budget with all of the administrators, and they make their case on what they need. Now, when it comes to something that's directly affecting children, that's where we place our priorities. And the schools are a little bit different, and so we're not necessarily going to spend the same amount of money on the same kinds of things. So it's really through the conversations that I have with the administrators and what they tell me about their student populations and what I see as I go through the schools and visiting. And then that case is made to the board, and then the board decides, okay, the budget it's a big budget this year. We've got to figure out where we can cut. And for the past few years, we have done some staff reductions. We've been able to do that without really nixing any programs, because we're trying to balance the dollars and the needs of each school and the students in each school, so.
And I think one of the other things, when you look at the bottom, the middle section of the budget, and we'll have that on Thursday night to really take a hard look at. Over the years, because we did our energy efficiency program several years ago, we've been able to save some money. Last year, our increase was $2,600 in that whole $2.8 million middle section, or $7 million middle section. Because we were able to save money on energy costs because of what we did from the energy audit standpoint. But we put the savings in there into computers and books and replacement furnitures and other things that are required to bring the schools up. So it's a moving target on where the money goes. And what we're trying to do is give the principals what they need to run their schools, but keep the taxpayers in mind, because they're the ones that have to pay the bill. So at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure that they have what they need, but nothing excess.
But you want to make sure that all the students in the district get a fair share.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that is our goal, to make sure, we've got 6 elementary schools here. We're hoping that every single student coming out of those elementary schools, when they walk into the middle school, have had an equal opportunity for an education and any equipment or whatever they need to get there. So when they get into the middle school, everybody's coming in at an even level. And that's our goal through our elementary schools. The principals meet, is it weekly?
Couple times a month.
At least a couple of times a month as principals, to talk about their needs, what's happening in their buildings, to really collaborate on what's happening within the district. So they know what's happening, and they can feed us back to the board on what's happening as well. So I understand where you're coming from, and our goal is to make sure that every student has what they need. And again, however those funds are massaged to get there, we hope the principals have presented a budget that has everything that they need included. And if they don't, they have to talk about, what their additional needs might be.
And I will say that the principals aren't shy when they feel that they have some students that really need something, or they really need to sharpen up their buildings in a particular area. None of them are shy. They will definitely advocate for their schools, and I don't think, I won't speak for you, but I'd like to think that they don't walk away feeling like the students' needs aren't being met because we haven't been able to work something out financially to do what's necessary. But you can ask them yourself.
I think, I can think of a couple of examples where, even though we are very similar, and we try to give all students the same experience. You know, one example might be that my building happens to have more security cameras that are operational right now than some buildings. And that's kind of the product of previous principals making that a priority. So even though we all have a similar budget, you do have some subjectivity in what the principal decides is the priority. So when it comes to grant funds for security this year, New Durham might not get quite as much for cameras because we're already ahead, but we'll get money for other things that we need in that same realm. Or like my building might need more money for grounds, and they're gonna look at taking that out of the district warrant so that they can help us to bring our property up to where it should be. So, you know, I think that they're right in that we all get what we need. It's just that we get it in different ways and at different times maybe to try to even things out, you know?
Or just depending on what the priority is. So
Right,
certainly we have
right.
district goals that we're all working to achieve, but each building has their
Mhm.
own set of unique goals too. We want to make
Mhm.
sure that we're using our
It
funds
would be
for that.
interesting to look at this year's budget, to see what was requested and how much the money was allocated against the various schools, to see if the decisions were made to fund the schools that needed the extra money.
That's actually really what tonight's process and tomorrow night's process is gonna be, because these are the requests that they've put in for the individual schools themselves. So this is what they're telling us they need for technology, what they need for heating, what they need for all the different pieces across and now if we go and say, okay, you know, Ossipee says they need $25,000 for computers and we're gonna scrap that, well, that wouldn't be smart on our part. But if they've got $25,000 in there and Crescent Lake has $20,000 in there and it's all technology related, we're not gonna cut technology because that's a priority right now for the principals. But they've included all of that in the individual budgets that they've presented. And as you can see, even though they presented all this stuff, the increases from one year to the next, we've got 6 schools here and it's less than $20,000 increase on the bottom line of their budgets for all their needs, because they've reduced some, they've increased others, they've looked at prior years where they budgeted and didn't spend as much, so they're not budgeting as much this year. So they've gone through that whole process. And again, where you have a school like Carpenter School, the total increase for everything is $4,300 for their operations, not teachers and not staff members, but their operations. But within that, you scale back to all the different line items, and they have a $13,000 increase in one and a $10,000 increase in another, but they've got offsetting decreases in other areas that they've prioritized on what they need. So we look at the totals that they're giving us and say, doesn't make sense. Now, we peel the onion back, and we say, okay, this is what they tell us they need, and if it's reasonable, it goes into the budget. And then it's up to the taxpayers at the end of the day, when we do our final budget presentation and the voting in March, to say yes or no. Okay, yes, sir.
I'm Rick Soretta. I've never been to a budget meeting before. I'm a selectman from Brookfield.
And let me thank you for coming, because I've been on the budget committee for almost 20 years. And this is the first time we've ever had anybody sit in the audience. So, thank you for being here.
It was enlightening for the first time to meet all the principals of the elementary schools and see the difference and similarities between each school and their request.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about the 76% of the budget that we don't know about until it's negotiated with the unions. And my first question is, who is the negotiating team for the district and the taxpayer?
Right now, there's 4 board members that sit on that negotiating team, and this is the way it's always been, you know, since the district was formed. There's board members that sit on the negotiating side, and we can get a professional lawyer in if we need to. And then on the teachers' side, it's usually 4 or 5 teachers that represent the union on their side. And if they want to get a union rep in, they can as well. This year's negotiation, we have 4 board members negotiating for the school district. with the support, obviously, of the business administrator and the superintendent with numbers and how it's going to affect budgets and all of that. And on the teacher's side, there's 5 teachers. On the support staff, there's 5 support members. And on the administrators, there's going to be 2 administrators. None of them have opted this year in direct negotiations to have a union representative on their side. So we opted not to have an attorney on our side because we can have a much more fluid conversation that way. So we look at the entire request that they're bringing in. Some of it's wording. You know, if you look at the collective bargaining agreement, there's 42 pages of language. Every time we sit down to negotiate, there's some items that they want tweaked here and there, or that we would like tweaked for consistency, or that's a benefit for them or a benefit for us that works for everybody. And then we come down to the salaries, the health insurance issues. I'm going to sound like a broken record because every time you see me, you'll probably hear the same thing. The state of New Hampshire's taking money out of our pocket. And as a selectman, I know you probably know that. When the retirement system was set up, back in the 70s, and the state paid 35% of the total of our bill. Just about 10 years ago, they dropped it to 25%. Then they dropped it to 15%. And now the state pays 0. And right now, in our budget that we're putting together right now, that's a $750,000 increase in the amount of taxes that the people in this district have to pay, because the state is reneging on their commitment. And they're doing the same thing with the stabilization grant that we get. They're taking 4% a year away from all the districts across the state. It's not just us. And that's about another $170,000 this year. So because the state is reneging on their responsibility, the taxpayers in this district and districts all across the state are paying more money. And just in this district, that's $980,000 in this current budget.
And that was for what?
The New Hampshire retirement system and the stabilization grant that they used to give us. And they're taking 4% a year away until that's gone. And this is the state legislature that's made that decision, that they promised, but they don't have to keep their promise. And the taxpayers are paying the bill. And I'd like that money back to put into technology, or put into some other stuff. Take a little piece of that, give the rest of it back to the taxpayers, but use a little bit of that money to help some of these issues that crop up. But anyway, so that's some of the battles that we have. But that top section of the budget, unfortunately, we can't put that whole thing together until we have these negotiated contracts finalized. Again, we're trying to do it with being fair to the teachers, being fair to support staff and the administrators, but keeping the taxpayers and the ultimate goal at the end of the day to keep the budget increase as small as possible.
So, to help me understand,
Yeah.
you have a New Hampshire Teachers Union, and all the districts, the teachers belong to that union.
The retirement system.
The negotiations of.
Well, there's NEA New England, or New Hampshire, New England, National Education Association of New Hampshire, is the union that they belong to. All the teachers in this, most of the teachers in the state, I don't know if some of them belong to the other national.
It's mostly local.
Mostly New Hampshire. And they have a union rep that can participate in negotiations if the local teachers want them to. They've chosen not to this year.
Okay, so each district negotiates separate?
Every school
Like a
district.
local.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
every school district, local,
Okay.
yeah, that's.
The local union here is a local,
Right.
all intents and purposes.
Yeah,
So they don't do it all at the same, collectively?
No.
They're at the
Every
same
school
time
district
cycle.
in the state, and there's how many school districts in the state? 172 school
Yeah.
districts in the state. Every school district in the state has their own individual contracts.
Has the district ever considered hiring professional negotiators to handle contracts?
We've had, it gets a little dicey, in all honesty. We try to have a respectful conversation with the teaching staff and the support staff and all that. Once you get lawyers involved, it becomes an issue. And again, not to get into details, but last year's negotiation, we went to mediation with the teachers. We wound up getting just a one-year contract out of it. But again, the union representative at that time, from the union, not the teachers' representatives, was a detriment to the process. And we did go to mediation. We sat in mediation for 13 hours, and we settled for what we offered them in the beginning. So in some respects, a professional negotiator might be the right answer. I've been on this committee for 20-some odd years, on this negotiating team as well. And we've had a very respectful conversation across, and usually coming up with something like any contract. If you walk out of there not really happy on either side, then you probably have a halfway decent contract. And we've been able to negotiate that pretty well over the years, keeping the teachers' staffs and their salaries within line of what's around the area. We always think that our teachers' pay and support staff and all have to be competitive with what's around the Lakes region and similar type schools. Benefits the same way, and we've been able to keep it reasonably consistent with what's around the areas.
And one last question.
Sure.
Has the teachers and the teachers' union ever taken a job action, strike, walkout?
Not
work stoppage?
Not in my 25 years on the board.
Okay.
I think the last time, I don't think they've ever had a strike. I think they had a massive walkout in the late 80s. And we had a huge turnover and all that, but that was before my time on the board. But no, we've never had a work stoppage of any kind.
Thank you.
And conversely, there was several years ago where they gave back some,
Yeah.
We've had.
Yeah. The teaching staff actually gave back, donated 5 days back to the district when things were tough and all that. They actually donated 5 days of pay back to the district to help reduce the budget and help out. So we've had a very good, respectful relationship on that, with the unions. Again, trying to come up with a contract that works for everybody, works for them, works for the board, works for the taxpayers, and keeps everything in perspective.
So could you talk a little bit more about that process? You folks come together with the union.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
Okay, we hammer out back and forth across the table, and once we agree and we say, okay, this is our offer, they say, okay, we'll accept your offer, then the next process, it comes back to the board, where the board, I do the presentation to the board, and the board will ratify the contract on the board side. They take their agreement to all of their members, which are all the teachers within the district. They have a big meeting, explain what the contract, the new language of the contract is, what the salary issues are, whatever that is, and then they take a vote. If it's ratified at that point, then it goes on a warrant article for passage in March to the taxpayers. But if either the board or the union does not ratify, then we're back at the negotiating table. But ultimately, the taxpayers have the final say in approving any of the contracts. And that's explained in full at the deliberative session. We usually have PowerPoint presentations and a lot of wording as far as what went into the contract negotiations and all that at the deliberative session.
And that's before the ballot.
Yeah, we, just so you know, after we finish this process this week, the next step is the preliminary budget hearing, which is the beginning of December. And then the final budget hearing is the beginning of January, and that is all by state law, the specific dates when that has to happen. And after that, then we have the deliberative session, which this year I think is January 31st?
February 2nd.
February 2nd? February 2nd.
Saturday.
Saturday, February 2nd. And then once the deliberative session is over, then we generally do our mailing to show everybody the budget and all that. Everybody in the district gets that mailing. and then voting is in March. So that's kind of where we are at this point in time. So, any other questions or anything we can help you with? So tomorrow night, we'll be back here with the high school, the middle school, and the vocational principal. And then Thursday night, again, we'll have the presentation by the special ed director and get into the actual nitty-gritty of what that center section of the budget looks like. And it's, again, mostly the center section, because the top section we can't finalize yet. But that's where all these numbers fall in, except for the staff requests. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you
Thanks.
coming.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.